Roar!
Ew.
Chapter 27 Epilogue.
Welcome back, America, to the final run of another amazing wipeout. I'm John Anderson, and with me, as always, is John Hansen.
That's right, John. We are set on the final run of the final stage, and we've finally convinced our final contestant to board the human catapult.
That's a lot of finals, John.
Reminds me of my last month of college.
A dip to white dissolve and rushing wind sound effect brought a national audience away from a studio overlooking a menacing obstacle course and into a montage of Stephen being swatted about by various heavily padded mechanical traps on an obstacle course earlier that morning.
Mr. Protractor was our only contestant today to clear the big balls and takes a $500 bonus.
Edited over each of his falls was a variety of crunching, clanging and smashing sounds, mixed in with a few embarrassing screams he had unintentionally let out as he took the hits.
He got a circumference divided by Granny's humble pie during the qualifiers, but managed to squeeze by just in time.
More clips played, altering between Stephen slowly clearing obstacle courses and stopping before each one to observe it, his eyes darting about as he watched the spinning mechanics.
He carefully calculated his way through the day and was first to beat both the Octolobber and Sugar Smacks. Now if he wants to wash down that candy with a sweet taste of victory and $50,000, he'll have to face a wipeout zone.
Another dip to white transition brought the cameras to Stephen tapping his foot nervously in a chair, wearing a black wetsuit, helmet and armoured life vest. His breaths were deep but quick, and his eyes were focused forward like a laser beam.
Well, Stephen had better make sure he can make those calculations quick in the brutal conditions of the wipeout zone, as the time to beat is set at 10 minutes and 17 seconds.
The audio quickly faded to the camera that was set on Stephen just in time for him to clench his legs together, cross his arms, clutch the armpits of his vest, and nearly hyperventilate.
Be brave. You can do this. It's just a little drop. It's not like you're getting thrown from a cliff.
Stephen psyching himself up for the launch.
Anderson commented. The last year and a half of Stephen's life flashed before his eyes. Despite some initial trust issues, him and Selena managed to recover their relationship with the help of advice from their family and friends. Reluctantly, Stephen went back to his customer service job. Although Damien was now making a point of avoiding Stephen, or being respectful towards him, Stephen still took a major pay cut. Between this, utilities, mortgage and hospital bills, money became tight, and he had considered a second job. However, Stephen had found it tough to figure out exactly what he could do that would employ his talents. Just as it was looking hopeless, he caught Selena watching this game show on television, and his hope returned almost instantly. Deciding to suffer financial hardship for a bit longer, he employed the help of Jake to increase his fitness level and save for the necessary expenses. Several months and 2 trips to California later, Stephen found himself about to be hurled through the air by a hydraulic catapult. Night had fallen hours ago, and his anxiety to begin the final test was mounting by the minute.
The catapult is 50 feet tall.
Stephen attempted to console his fears.
At about 160 pounds, I'll travel between 60 and 70 feet.
Listen to him go, John.
Henson interjected.
It's almost like he's trying to apply all that useless math they tried to teach me in school.
Probably makes you wish you paid attention, doesn't it?
Not at all. That's why I'm getting paid to be up here while he's down there.
Stephen lost track of how fast his heart was going, and all the logical thoughts that his head was swimming with a moment ago were replaced with how much he wished there had been a water slide or something that didn't involve as much airtime as a catapult. Tapping his thigh, he felt his cutie mark through the wetsuit and reminded himself that he could do it. He'd done it before when it was much more dangerous. Taking a deep breath, he readied himself one last time.
Remember the proper diving form, but don't think,
he muttered to himself.
How's not thinking going to help him? He's been doing nothing but thinking all day.
Henson commented, when the camera cut to him for a second. The beeping of the launch sequence started as Anderson replied,
Well, we're about to find out as the final run gets underway.
Stephen's stomach lurched in the chair as it pulled him through the air, going from 0 to 30 in 2 seconds, and stopping abruptly at its apex. Despite his gut-wrenching fear of falling, Steven stayed curled into a ball until he felt himself turn over the water below. Still screaming, he straightened out his body and spread his arms, holding it as he slowly turned mid-air. At the apex of his flight, he followed its trajectory to a spot in the water. Plummeting towards it, he held his breath, tucked his chin into his chest, and pointed his fingers over his head. The result was a 45-degree angle entry into the frigid water after a terrifying 3-second drop.
Whoa! Look at that perfect swan dive form straight into the drink.
Henson called over an instant replay.
Mr. Protractor is off to a great start as he heads for the first obstacle, the flaming throatisserie.
Letting his leftover momentum carry him, he turned his body and effortlessly glided through the frigid nighttime water until he was halfway to the first podium. Ascending a narrow ramp, a wall of flames roared up at the back of the stage and dissipated as quickly as it came. Steven found himself faced with heavily padded beams about 30 feet long and 12 inches thick. There were 5 of them, laced with glowing LED lights and set on a spinning rotary.
There he goes again, Mr. Protractor calculating his obstacle before even trying to find the solution.
That's right, John. It's good to figure out what you're going to do, but that only helps if you get it right the first time. Otherwise, you add to your time, which can slip away quick in the wipeout zone.
But that strategy has been paying off for him most of today. Let's see if it will help him here while fighting both the clock and the hazards.
With a plan in mind, Steven climbed through a hole and into the rosary. Right away, he grabbed onto the beams and pressed his footing into the padding. It was slick with water and he almost slipped. But since falling wasn't an option, he willed himself sturdy and made it so. Thanking Pie for the advice over a year ago, he shuffled sideways while simultaneously hamster walking forward and against the rotary spin.
I think he's going to do it!
Henderson called out as Steven passed the halfway mark.
But he's gotta be careful. That moving platform at the end tripped up the first contestant 3 times.
Steven eyed the platform through a hole. He had only a second to pick his course and landing position. Acting quickly, he dropped onto the platform. As soon as his feet touched down, it dropped 2 feet out from under him. He was caught by surprise but kept his eyes forward and latched onto the next platform, touching both feet down on the lowering, finishing platform below him. He was clear. He didn't allow himself a moment to relax. There wasn't a moment to spare as he pulled himself towards the next obstacle by his elbows. Jogging around the thoracery, several dozen spotlights illuminated the dark obstacle ahead. The water jets splurted into the air over it. When the mist cleared, Steven was looking at 2-story spiraling staircase. Padded helicopter blades spun at the 1/4 and 3/4 mark of the staircase, which led to the top of a large grey and spinning flat-topped sphere. With a leap, Steven flopped safely onto the starting platform. Quickly but carefully getting to his feet, he scurried towards the obstacle. Using all 4s, he noted the speed of the spinning poles and began scaling the stairs. After 3 steps, he stopped and ducked as a padded blade swung over his head. It bonked his helmet just hard enough to jostle his grip.
Oh, that looked like a hard hit from the sweep arm, but Steven holds tight.
Double-checking his grip, Steven bolted halfway up the stairs and just barely missed the second half of the pole swinging across his feet. At about 3/4 of the way up the stairs, he stopped and waited for the next padded pole to pass over. Time was running out, and he wanted to move faster. But that idea was quickly squashed, as doing so would sacrifice time to assure proper footing and reading trajectories, which would guarantee time-killing visit to the drink. So he'd simply have to keep his pace, hope he had done enough time, and not mess up. Once more he tapped his thigh and felt his mark through his wetsuit. I can do this, he reminded himself. This wasn't easy, but it was still much easier than it was the first time he'd done something like this. After all, he'd been practicing, and nobody was shooting at him. A harsh blast of water doused his face and blurred his vision. Correction, he thought to himself. No ponies were shooting at him. Steven had just enough time to wipe his face while the sweeper bar passed over his head. His vision almost cleared, he bolted to the top of the steps and hopped into the real obstacle. A brief turret of pyrotechnics greeted his arrival.
The dark side of the moon is a real poser to most contestants.
Mr. Protractor has been very lucky not to have any wipeouts yet, but that's likely been due to his ability to see what he was doing. Here, he'll have to jump down the shaft of the moon and slide blindly to the finish platform.
This obstacle will test your timing as well as your luck.
Even with luck, you've still got to get down the slide fast enough to clear the gap between the moon and the next platform.
Stephen wasn't going to get fooled here. The two contestants that had gone before him both jumped into the hole blindly, as well as did it wrong. The slide before him was a completely covered shaft that dropped through the moon and spat him out about halfway down. He would need enough momentum to be launched about 5 feet through the air at an arc and onto the next obstacle's platform. It was risky, and Stephen didn't know how much time he had left, but he was going to stand at the top of the slide and wait for just the right moment. Even worse was that he happened to land on the obstacle just as the slide's opening, forcing him to wait one painfully slow rotation. As soon as the time came, Stephen leapt into the air and dropped straight down into the shaft, taken by nearly frictionless surface of the wet slide. He gained excess amounts of momentum during the drop and was spat out with more than enough force to not only land on the other platform, but slide across and bump into the next obstacle. Stephen tried to shake off the adrenaline as he clambered to his feet. The ending was in sight, and there wasn't any more time left to lose. All Stephen had to do was hop from a trampoline and through a waterfall. He'd be landing on a slick platform on the other side to do it again with another trampoline. Then he'd be at the finish line. All he had to do was land properly and he'd be fine. Rushing ahead, he slammed both feet down onto the trampoline and lunged forward. The next thing he knew, he was overwhelmed by darkness and submerged in water. Resurfacing as quickly as possible, he took a shocked breath and winced at his ribcage. Looking up at the obstacle, he saw 2 sets of rapidly spinning padded blades. The darkness of night and the waterfall had perfectly concealed the traps. How could he have been so foolish not to check for those before rushing forwards? That's exactly what the first contestant did, and it caused the guy to go out this obstacle 3 times before finally making it to the finish.
Oh, and Stephen, not paying attention, takes a rough hit into the freezing waters.
Henson shouted as they watched Stephen plummet on an instant replay.
He took his eyes off the prize and broke away from his careful strategy, John. Now he's going to pay the price as that swim back to the start takes a serious hit to his remaining time.
He'd been moving too slow. It's over, he knew it. There's no way he'd win now. The other competitors may have needed to do the obstacles at least twice each, but they all moved much quicker than he did. Any lead he might have had from now, having to repeat the prior obstacles, was demolished by that one stupid mistake. But after 2 seconds the buzzer didn't go off yet. Time wasn't out. Failing was unacceptable, but even worse would be failing without giving it everything he had. Unlike the first time he had taken this mentality before going into battle, this Stephen knew exactly what to do. Bearing the pain and doing his best to ignore the bitter cold water, Stephen stoked his way 10 yards back to the ladder and climbed up to the obstacle. This time he carefully stepped onto the trampoline, righting himself as he bounced him slightly. He couldn't see through the waterfall, knowing better than to try and guess it a second time. He stuck his head through the waterfall and gauged their speed. 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. Stephen counted the beats in his head as each pull passed his vision. Keeping the timing in his head, he straightened back and started to bounce on the trampoline. After a few warm-up bounces and reminding himself to just do it, he stomped hard onto the trampoline. Blindly bouncing, Stephen passed through the waterfall and right in between the padded propeller blades. However, he realised he'd overshot the platform as soon as he found himself hurtling directly towards the gap between the platform and the next trampoline. Letting out a cry of desperation, he angled his feet forwards and caught the next trampoline. At the angle he landed, he might have bounced backwards. Instead, he righted himself before going airborne by throwing all of his weight forward as hard as possible. Not having any choice, he flew through the second waterfall and towards the finishing platform. As he reached out for the finish line, a propeller nicked the heel of his foot and threw him off his trajectory. Adrenaline shot through his system as he crawled desperately for the finishing platform. He landed awkwardly, with his solar apex at the corner, and started to slide.
No!
He shouted and gripped the padded canvas so hard that it bent his fingernails.
Stephen, not going down without a fight. Holds on for dear life. Can he make it?
Anderson shouted from the studio. Shouting his determination to the heavens, Stephen dragged himself up inch by painful inch. A year's worth of Jake's torturous fitness drills and another rush of adrenaline couldn't make the difference through his fingernails alone. Taking a huge risk, Stephen swung his lower body to the right and used every ounce of his abdominal strength to launch his hips to the left. Swinging his legs, he propped one ankle over the platform's edge to aid his fingers. With one last shout and powerful tug, Stephen threw himself onto the platform with a wet thud. His lungs were on fire, as bad as when he had been walking through the desert despite all of the cold water surrounding him. He had been just as dehydrated. The finished platform was padded comfortably, and it would have been too easy to rest for a moment to regain composure. But even though the buzzer hadn't gone off yet, resting still wasn't an option. It could go off at any second and defeat every last bit of Stephen's effort. Grunting, panting, and subsiding adrenaline, prophesying a serious energy crash, Stephen shakily placed one foot flat on the platform. Launching himself straight up, he smashed the second foot down with a mighty stomp and bellowed victoriously at millions of people watching comfortably from their homes. Breathing heavily, he finally relaxed and looked at the clock.
And with that, Mr. Protector comes in with an earth-shattering time of 6 minutes and 4 seconds!
Henderson cheered from the studio. A distant feminine voice washed over Stephen's ears.
Stefan, you've just won $50,000!
Jill Wagner called out from just outside the obstacle course. Revitalized by the good news, Stephen burst into laughter, representing his unparalleled joy. First, he would pay off his medical bills and mortgage, but there was even more important piece of news that he needed to get off his chest right away. Looking straight into the camera, he shouted,
Pack your bag, Selena, we're taking a vacation.
And that was Dreamquestria, written by our very own Brawny Buck. I had good fun with this. I know it's taken quite a while to get out, and I'm pretty sure it's going to take a little longer. A little bit longer, I mean. And it's awesome. I love having good fun with this. Sure, it's cliche in the way of, one of a human going to the equestrian world, but it's unique enough. And I just love it. Every time I was recording this, I'd be reading ahead and being like, oh wait, I'm meant to be recording this, I'm not just reading this. And with all the people that have come forward and done things, even when I've really needed people, thank you to Scribbler, thank you to our professional voice actor as for Applejack. That was amazing. I was very impressed with that. I was like, seriously? Yay! Just thank you to everyone for jumping in and helping out when I needed. I finally finished recording this, which is brilliant. Sadly, life gets in the way. And now it's time to chase up everyone else. Just kidding. Hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you, Brawny Buck, for letting me read this, and I hope you all enjoyed. Keep watching that moon! And a howling thank you to my Patreons.